and welcome to the Raising Risk-Free Teens podcast. I'm your host, Cheryl LaBelle. In this risky world we live in today, we want to equip parents to help their teens avoid unnecessary risk. We'll touch on hot topics of the current culture. We'll talk about sexual risk avoidance and any other important information to keep you informed as a parent. All of our topics are rooted in science, facts, and medical accuracy, not opinion. Thanks for listening and hope you enjoy the podcast. Raising kids today takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And it's great when you have both a mother and a father involved. But we know in today's society, you don't always find that. We have a lot of family systems that are hurting or broken. The divorce rate continues to go up, and oftentimes we find a lot of parents don't even live together, or they cohabitate and eventually break up. But today we're going to discuss the importance of fatherhood, why we need to have those men in our children's lives. And our guest speaker with us is Eusi Fraser. He is the Male Advocate Director for Clarity's Client Services. Thanks for joining us today, Eusi.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so as we look at our culture today and we talk about fatherhood involved in the lives of our children that are growing up, of course, which eventually become husbands and wives and mothers and fathers as adults as well, what are we seeing? What is kind of this dilemma that we're encountering?
That's a loaded question, and I'm going to give a caveat. I am not a professional, but I've been alive for a little bit, and I work in an organization where my primary role and job is to meet with dads. And so I get an inside scoop on a lot of things, right? We have, in some cases, 5 to 15 minutes with these dads. In other cases, 35 to 45 minutes. It is hard because it varies, okay? Just yesterday, I had a client who is about to be a new dad. He's 19 years old. And as we were talking, right away, it came out. He never met his dad.
That's hard.
Exactly, right? And so once I hear that, I immediately stepped into, hey, we exist to walk alongside you in this aspect, to resource you, to help you in whatever way you see possible. But he came back around and he says, however, my grandfather has been my role model, has been my source.
That's great.
That is great, but there was another but in there, right? Grandpa did a great job until he decided to make a decision that Grandpa didn't agree with. And then Grandpa was like, you're out. And so I'm looking at this kid and I'm thinking, wow, you feel rejected by dad, right? He's probably wrestling with, I'm not wanted. And then he's seeing now that if he doesn't do the things that is required, whether spoken or unspoken, by the person that he values the most in fatherhood, he's going to be kicked out again.
Yeah, that would be conditional love.
Right.
And as parents, man, that's the challenge, right? To unconditionally love our children,
Right.
even when they do make poor choices. We won't say do bad things. That
Right.
implies you can't come back from that.
I wouldn't even say make poor choices, but make choices that we don't agree with.
Yeah, in the learning
Because
process.
it might not be anything wrong, but it just might be something that we don't approve of.
Yeah. Yeah, and we want to love them through that because we want to create that safe environment for them to make the mistakes so that when they're out on their own, they're making healthier choices.
Absolutely.
Or sometimes we learn along that route too, that some of the choices they make aren't always the worst, and they do work out well for our kids. Because I know we like to have this idea of where they're going to go, and it doesn't always happen that way. You mentioned that you didn't grow up having a father. We've talked before, and you've mentioned this too, that you didn't grow up with a father. And I can identify the same too. I had a single mom who raised me for various reasons, but at one point, just before I turned 5, my dad was hit and killed by a drunk driver. So even if he wanted to be more involved in my life than he was when I was younger, that was taken off the table. So I know looking back, hindsight is always 20/20. And these kinds of conversations, talking about the importance of fatherhood, like these can be difficult for me because I can look back and I can see how I have been negatively impacted by not having my dad. And not just my dad, because I would be, genetically connected to him. I've got some of that personality traits, things like that, that I appreciate come from that side of my family. But that's been hard. Now, my mom remarried. I have a stepdad now, and he's wonderful. He ended up adopting me when I was 18, and I love him very much, but it's still not the same. But I know it did have a positive impact on me. So now looking forward, how do I make healthy choices for my own children and really try to encourage that? And I can only do so much because I'm a mom.
Yes.
You need that other half. So in some of the statistics that we've seen, what we're learning, and this is just from 2018, some statistics from the U.S. Census Bureau, more than 1 in 4 children live without a father in the home. So that's more than 25% of our population. It could be a stepdad or even an adopted father. And I appreciated when reading up on some of this, learning that stepdads have a huge impact on their kids too. And so my mom was very young when she had me. She was 16, and then remarrying when I was 13. Then they started having more children together. So my mom was pregnant a lot of the time in my high school years. And I played soccer in South Carolina, and this was a spring sport, not a fall sport. And so it would get hot, and my dad came to every single soccer game. He would even travel to the games that were really far away. And I'm like, Dad, you don't have to do that. You don't have to be there. But he did. Of course, he had this loud voice on the sidelines, and I'm like, Dad, you're not the coach. Stop telling me what to do. But regardless, now as an adult looking back, that's much more meaningful to me, and I can see that impact I didn't see when I was a teenager. So it does go a long way. And even today, he's more than happy to bend over backwards to come help me work on the house or go play golf with my husband. All kinds of good dad things that he does.
Dads are amazing. I don't say this to my kids, but I think about it and I was like, man, the question is, what are some of the things that you're proud of? It's like, man, proud of being a dad, right? It's just a unique opportunity. And stepfathers, like, so in our centers, these dads will come in and I'll ask them and said, what is your relationship with your dad? And it's like, oh, we're close and different things like that. And later on in the conversation, it will come out that what the person they're calling dad is actually their stepdad, and he has had a bigger impact on their lives more than their biological dad. The fact I think that we can take away from this is when a child have a father figure, a role model, someone in the home that can model certain things for them, it sets them up for success.
Yeah, it has a huge impact. So there was some information about some of the negative risks of not having a father in a child's life growing up. And some of them were kind of shocking, like more likely to commit a crime or to go to prison, more likely to become pregnant as a teen. When you look at some of those statistics, what really stands out to you?
Yes, some of these things I definitely got into. Seeing the dads that come in, we see a lot of young dads, and I remember one that came in and he got into trouble, a lot of trouble. The first time he went to prison, he was about 15.
Oh, wow.
But when we saw him, he was about to be a first-time dad. And one of the things that he was aspiring to, I think he had recently lost his grandmother, who was very impactful in his life. Absentee father. His dad pretty much went down this path, right? Prison, crime, alcohol. And so he didn't really have much of a good example. But his grandmother was someone who had tremendous influence on him. And he wanted to not let her down. And one of the promises he made to her was, hey, I'm going to do right. But he was definitely doing that path. And one of the reason why I brought that up one of our facts stated that when a man becomes a dad, it changes him. And I kind of saw that in this young man, right? He was looking at life differently. He started to realize, okay, I've got to take on some responsibilities, right? There's a book that I started reading years ago, Seven Secrets of Effective Dads, and that book had a report from a survey that they did that mentioned that most dads that we would consider good fathers did not themselves have a good father.
Something happened that caused them to change and want to be different because they had that a drastic, obvious difference, right? In how they grew up and who they wanted to be.
Yes, I have a leader that I follow who stated that we can thank our fathers for teaching us, whether by a good example or a bad example, what to do or what not to do. But dad did teach us.
Yeah, even at a subconscious level, we are learning from the adults that are in our lives. So, as we're talking through this, there can be great nuclear families with a mom and a dad, and they raise their kids well, raise them right, and kids will still make their own choices. So, even if there's a father involved, we still see young men or young women too that make poor choices. And same thing too, like you mentioned, that stark contrast for a lot of young men who didn't have a father in their lives, but yet they are making good, healthy choices. So just because they don't have a father in their lives doesn't mean they're going to go down this horrible road. Let's focus on what some of the strengths are of having a father present in the family.
When dad is involved, typically kids do better, right? Moms do better. Criminal activity, suicide. Now, alcohol and substance abuse. Now, I do a program, a fatherhood program in Johnson County, and one of the guys in there talk about, again, his dad was present, but his dad wasn't involved, right? And so, father presence doesn't always equate to fatherhood involvement, but just the presence of dad, it does change things. It helps mom, dad, children. It helps them stand on a firmer foundation, right? And if dad is involved and if dad is doing these things, then you find that children are more adventurous, right? These kids would be like, yeah, I can do it, right? Just watch me. My youngest would say, watch me, I can do all these things, and it's like, I don't think you can. But if I don't stop her, she will try. She might fail, but she will try. But it just gives them that safety of, from here, I can jump off and do pretty much anything.
Yeah, and looking over a lot of the information for today and preparing for this, the one theme, a really strong theme that I see through all of this is support
Yeah.
between mom and dad in their marriage, which then makes them better parents as they co-parent together. For the kids too, as dad is there. And I think you're right. Being present is not the same as being involved. And it just makes sense because we know that we are so much more than just what people see on the outside. We have so many more layers. There's that emotional and that social, even the ethical. We like to frame a lot of things with this holistic approach of our whole person, all these different elements that make up who we are. And there's a lot of research out there that will show too, when we're not mentally healthy, and that's tapping more into our emotional health, we tend to make poor choices in other areas of our life. We don't eat as well. There's even with male adolescents, there's a lot of risky behavior that goes with that too, that they'll take that can be dangerous for them. So if they're not happy, and it's deeper than that, it's not even happiness. That's too simplistic. But they do go seeking those needs elsewhere, and it doesn't always satisfy and fulfill. Here's some stuff I thought was really interesting, looking at some of the information about how dad's involvement produces better results with their children, but how father involvement really builds up their kids. It builds up some resiliency and protective factors. And that goes a long way in society. But here are some of the things I saw. Playing with their infants when their children are very young helps their children have good mental and social outcomes.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that that has that kind of an impact? That when dads read to their children, it helps their children's thinking and language skills. We always know that reading to children is important, but here's a direct correlation to dads reading to their kids, not just moms. You've mentioned too fewer behavior problems. I think that really plays out in middle childhood and especially in the teen years, at adolescence. Boys can have fewer behavior problems, and girls have fewer psychological problems. And I think that's huge. Maybe I'm saying that because I am a girl. But if you're not getting that healthy attachment, that healthy relationship with a dad in your life or another male role model,
Yeah.
then you tend to seek it out someplace else. Yes. And boy, that's a lot of responsibility to put on another young man who's probably their brain is not fully developed and they're not prepared to have that. And it's not their responsibility either, but just that impact having a dad in your life
Yeah.
can, and
Make a difference.
I didn't see it until years later as an adult.
Yeah.
And I don't fault my mom because,
Yeah.
for lots of reasons, but she was trying to provide the best life she could for us. And thankfully she wasn't just dating any guy, to have men in and out of my life. So I understand why I am how I am, but it's challenging looking back. So looking forward, we just really want to provide these good things for our kids if we can. Relationships are so important. And we know even from COVID, we've seen how that isolated people and it hurt people, especially mental health wise. And it really changed our world. It brings that awareness to how much more we need to be social and be in person relationships with people. And so now this parenting relationship and that mother-father relationship is so vital to our kids and how they grow up. So talking more about that support, dads aren't just on their own. They shouldn't be, really. I mean, marriage is meant to be a partnership to help and support one another. And there's a lot of research that shows how dads can be better when they feel more supported by their wives or by their partners.
Or by mom. Yeah. Definitely, dads are not alone. There is so many guys, so many programs that exist to help dads, and there's so many content out there. Again, you gotta filter it because they're not all great, but they're out there, and nobody expect dads to figure it out because again, some guys are great at physical things. They might be great at sports, but they might not be great at the emotional stuff. You talk about the holistic view, right? We need all these other factors. And so once you figure out, hey, I don't have this, this is what I have, I don't have this, then start getting those other pieces. One of the things I did, and I still do today, I befriend people that I admire. I befriend guys that I admire. There's a guy who is a great friend of mine. And the way I met him is super weird. But one of the things that attract me to him is his physical stature, how he looked and how he dressed. Those things were important to me, and I wanted to be his friend. And we became friends, and we're friends to this day, probably 15 years now, right? I also admire the way he did things with his kids, the way he operated with his wife. And so I look at him to learn, and I encourage guys, look, there's some things you're going to learn by reading. There's some things you're going to learn by doing yourself. And there's a lot of things you're going to learn by watching. Watch other guys who are hitting it out of the park. Learn from them. Some of them you can ask, hey, why do you do that? Some of them you can't because they're not your friend, but you can still watch them.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we're talking in terms of marriage, but there is a lot of divorce out there. Still having dad involved, even if mom has primary custody. Something that I saw too was allowing dads to have that access to their kids. And I think cell phones kind of make that a lot easier because they can text whenever they want. They can FaceTime. they can do a lot of things, to maintain that relationship, even if they're not everyday present. And that takes a little effort on dads. I heard one dad say, well, I've been reaching out to my kids, but they really haven't been responding. And I don't want to push them. And I thought, that's very silly. You're the dad. This is your responsibility to show them that you care about them. And you've said, he has said that, right? He wants to be involved in their lives. So don't let your children dictate that. Continue to reach out, show them that you care and that you're always going to be there, even if they don't respond for a couple of days to a text or whatever.
Find their primary language too, because you might be reaching out, I'm sorry to say this, but the old school way. You might be reaching out by calling.
Yeah.
And the time you call, they can't answer, or they don't like talking on the phone.
Yeah.
Right? And so you might have to text, or you might have to FaceTime, or whatever it is, right? The other thing we have to do as dads is make ourselves available to our kids.
Yeah.
It's not always going to be possible, right? But you have to let them know they are important. One of the rules I have, and I encourage dads to have, is I have a policy, depending on who's calling me, I answer my phone, if I can answer my phone. Okay, if I can't, I'll call them back. There's different ringtones on my phone. And if I'm not where my phone is, I know by how my phone is ringing whether that's a call I need to walk over and answer if I'm able to, or whether as soon as I can, I return that
Sure.
call. Simple things like that also communicates to these kids, hey, you are important to me,
Yes.
right? And then, of course, mom being supportive. Mom, especially in families where they're not together. So I grew up in a divorced home. One of the things I never heard, my mom never really did, she never talked about my dad. Negatively, mainly, but even positively much.
She didn't talk about him.
One of the things I knew is that my dad was a good cook. And I probably inherited that from him. I don't know. My mom would disagree. The one thing she let me know early is that I cook like him, and that is when there's ingredients in the house, I use way too much, right? But those are things that you learn. But be careful how you, especially in a separated home, and the same goes for that as well. Don't talk about your children, mom, like they're garbage.
Yeah.
That's their mother. That's their father. Respect them. Because when you start doing it, for whatever reason, they're getting older, they start to disrespect mom or disrespect dad.
It's a behavior that they learn, even if it's at a subconscious level. And so the way that we treat others is teaching our children to treat others. And that is so vital.
Why involved dads are good for mom gives you more leisure time.
Yes. And again, I think it comes down to that supportive factor. Let's talk about it through terms of holistically. It's more intellectual support because the two of you are talking about brainstorming. Here's the situation. Our child is doing this. How do we handle it? This kind of punishment didn't work, or this redirection didn't work. We need to try a different approach. What are your thoughts? And you're going to have two different approaches, which is always helpful, right? To discuss and try to find a solution. Financially, if you have two incomes coming in, that also relieves some stress so that you can spend some money on the kids. You can also spend some money invested in your time together. Maybe you can afford eating out, and that just relieves a certain level of expectation and stress there too. Our society doesn't always paint a good picture of marriage.
Yeah.
But really, there's statistics that show that the people who are married are the happiest.
Yeah.
They are the most financially stable, maybe not in the highest tax bracket, but, making decisions and finding where they can live within their means comfortably. And that helps. It just relieves a lot of pressure. So there's a lot of good reasons to be married. But I think, too, as we've noted, if you're in a divorced home, still having that support. And maybe if mom and dad live near each other, if dad can find ways to take the kids when mom just needs a break, even if, again, they're not in the same household, but maybe in the same neighborhood or the same city, just little things. But that would require healthy communication between the parents. But the healthier that is, the healthier the kids are going to be too.
We had an amazing story, and it wasn't even shared with me, but one of our volunteers. But this dad that came in, he was married and divorced, lives here in Indy now. But the reason why he lives in Indy is because when he and his wife were separating, she had family here. And so she wanted to move back here. They were in another state. And so he agreed that he was going to move close so that he can be next to his kids. Tough decision, but what an amazing decision,
Yeah.
right? I am sure that his kids benefited greatly and mom benefited greatly from that decision.
You mentioned earlier that when a man becomes a dad, he is transformed. How do you see that playing out?
I did a personal survey a little bit ago about dads, and so I was in a room with dads of preschoolers, and some of them had multiple kids, and I asked them, "Do you consider yourself a good dad based upon your actions towards your kids?" Not what mom said, not what society says, just based on your actions. Nobody responded. And I was like, the answer is yes. So I asked all the dads that I knew, and many of them said yes. And here's why. And some of them were based on the fact that they're emotionally present for their kids, the fact that they're modeling certain things for their kids. Again, this is solely based on their actions towards their kids. Dads change, men change once they start to become a dad. It's not immediate, and again, you're going to be working against all of your habits, all of the things that you've learned through life. So if you're a critical person, you would look at them and be like, "Oh no, they're still the same," but they take on more responsibility. There is a program that the National Fatherhood Initiative has that is called 24/7 Dad, and I was looking at one of their clips, and a lot of the dads that they help may have a criminal record or may have trouble in their past, right? And this one dad that was in this program, you could see the wheels turning. And, they challenge him. It's like, look, you have to do better for your child. And he was like, the reason why I am here is because in order for me to make a different future for my child, I have to take these steps. And so now he was taking on more responsibility. He was doing the hard work, right? The child was still young. He was starting to go to school, starting to go through these programs so that when the child gets older, he's in a better position to be a healthy support. So a lot of dads, you will, if I survey them, and the ones I have surveyed, the things that they're giving their children now, they themselves didn't get from their fathers.
And just like all of these things, as we've talked about, the different characteristics and the ways that dads can be involved, and everyone's wired a little bit differently. Everyone's gifted a little bit differently. Some men are good at expressing their emotions. Right. Other men are better at doing actions, like doing acts of service for the people in their lives rather than putting it into words, because they're not good at that. And I think that we learn from our parents too, and sometimes those are good habits, sometimes they're unhealthy habits. For some people, that is a catalyst to make them want to be different, right? Because I didn't feel like I was well served in my family as how to be a man and how to speak to my wife or to the people around me, to friends, all of that. So it's interesting to see how we do change, especially as parents, when we have a reason to live for something and work for something outside of ourselves. And I think some men are better at it than others, but I also appreciate how you said that if there's a conflict, it can be resolved. It doesn't matter, even if it goes on for a very long time. Sometimes it takes some people a while to recognize that they want to change, or they want to be different, or they want to make a relationship right.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that too. There's always that room for healing, room for restoration.
Yeah.
And it takes some work, but it can be done, and the impact and the outcome is going to be long lasting. And to speak to that as well, I think where dads think that they're really making an impact later on, if you ask their children what was the most impactful thing that they did, it's not that one thing that they worked so hard to do. It was something small or minor that they didn't even realize they were communicating or conveying. And again, that can be humbling too, but in a really good way, right?
I mean, I remember I would never do this again, and I do not encourage you to do this. But if you dare, you can try it. So I asked my son one day, because I was just feeling great about my fatherhood skill. I asked my son one day, I said, hey, how am I doing as a dad on a scale from 1 to 10? I felt I was like a 13 or a 15. I'm not kidding. And he said something like 6 or 7, and I was dumbfounded. I'm present. I mean,
all of these things you're
all these
doing,
things,
and
right?
he doesn't acknowledge them
Well,
or appreciate
I
them.
asked him why do you say that? After I got a little bit of courage, he said he felt like I was too involved.
Oh, you were a helicopter parent.
He did not use those words.
No, those are cultural terminology.
Right. Maybe, but I took that as an encouragement.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
the other thing he said, and I realized he was measuring my fatherhood against what his friends' parents were doing.
So you were more involved than his friends' dads.
His friends had freedom to do these things, and their parents didn't care whether or not boys were doing this. I did not take that as a bad thing.
No, it's a compliment. Yeah. And I think our culture just doesn't celebrate fatherhood the way that, dads deserve, the way that men deserve to be treated, because there is a lot of respect and there is a lot of support for it.
Yes.
So just like talking with your children, as you mentioned too, talking to other dads,
Yes.
that provides new perspective. That's encouraging. You can learn things. I think moms tend to talk to other moms a lot, but it's really great to see dads talking to dads too.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Outside of the weather and sports, just real
Yes.
stuff.
Yes, or outside of their kids' accomplishments. I think when you can see men discussing some of the challenges that they have, that's huge too, because that's also not talked about in society. That's not celebrated, that men are allowed to have vulnerabilities
Yeah.
or emotions.
There's a great song by Dax, "To Be a Man." I encourage dads to check it out.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening. This podcast is brought to you by Clarity of Central Indiana. We hope you enjoyed today's topic. Be sure to leave us a review and share with your friends. You can find any links mentioned in the episode notes. Always remember that you have value, you have worth, you matter.